to our energetic aspects of narcissist and empath trauma sacred self-healing workshop live. My name is Jona Bryndis, energy healer and energy trainer, and together we're going to explore and discuss the aspects, the attraction between the empath and the narcissist, what this looks like, and the surface of what we can do to prevent this, and most and foremost, hear from you what your experiences are. Our sacred self-healing workshops, something that you might find unusual, but part of the member service here at transCODES for those of you who are actively working on aspects of self-healing, self-discovery, learning how to regulate your energetic sensitivity, training it, and so forth, is open mic. So here's what I'm going to do, and you don't need to worry about this because everybody has the opportunity, right, to stay anonymous. Nobody knows each other here. I mean, some people have met at live workshops, but that's actually rare. And so we can jump right in. We got a lot to talk about. Okay, so what is the circle here? This is a circle of energetically sensitives and empaths. And this, is a group of people that studies all the aspects of energy work, energy healing, and coming from all different kinds of backgrounds. So there are some healers here, but they're mostly, people like you and I who just try to make sense of some of the things that we're experiencing. All this work is remotely, so we share here. We've learned the power of healing through sharing. And so when we do these workshops, these sacred self-healing workshops, they often are in conjunction with the Sacred Self-Healing course, which is different lessons, different steps, where we teach different modalities. But these workshops here are also open for people from the outside who would like to know more about how to deal with the energetic aspects of certain life's problems, life situations. And so I just want you guys to know, whether you're in the Sacred Self-Healing course or not, that you're all welcome. There is no difference. I don't even know whether you're a member or not. I mean, except for those names that I know really well. And I want to encourage you to share. We did a lot of trauma healing here this last weekend, and one of the things that stuck out for all of us is the power of taking action, the power of actually going out and having your trauma witnessed. This is not so much about other people trying to help you or fix anything. This is more about the speaking up and validating that which hurts you. There is an enormous healing power in this, and I'm not saying that we all have to lay out everything in detail, but there's a power in having people, even if you don't know them, to witness some of the things that you have gone through. For me as a speaker, to have you share things always helps me relating things to real life problems, because then I can refer to what you guys shared, and you don't have to say your names or anything. I can just refer to the mechanics or whatever. This just makes it a bit more lively. As most of you probably know, I have a scientific background. I'm used to doing like 2-3 hours lectures, so I can easily talk forever, but I would really like to encourage you to ask questions, because it makes it more lively, makes it more personal in that sense without being too personal. All right, so the objective of this workshop is to share and ask personal questions, therefore, on first spot, to increase our awareness and to educate ourselves. And we will learn why education here, especially with narcissist empath issues, is one of the best preventions. I encourage you to become an active participant in your life's journey. This is particularly the case if we have been traumatized, by any kind of say life circumstances or event that feels difficult to share, difficult to to discuss with other people, and of course learning strategies for prevention and perhaps recovery. So today we will only be able to scratch the surface with the recovery, since this is such a complex subject. We will only be able to really look at the basics of it. So what I would like to talk to you about today, or my goal, is that we get these things covered here in the time together. And that is the energetic aspects of trauma altogether, like in general. I will kind of zoom through this and you'll have the slides. And then narcissistic abuse syndrome, or narcissistic victim disorder, as this is sometimes called in psychology. I'm going to go through this in a bit more detail. Then we're going to look at the energetics of empaths and narcissists. Also, the sort of basic definitions of what is an empath, what is a narcissist. Okay, this is very important for us to even get these words down, because there's a lot of confusion when it comes to discerning all this, and especially when we look at YouTube videos or articles or anything on the internet. There is not always this clarity. So by looking at the energetics of that, actually it gives us a little uh, deeper insight into what it actually is that we're talking about. And then we're going to talk about early signs, like perhaps when you start dating someone who feels narcissistic to you, or where there's like sort of red flags. Also red flags in a relationship, that you perhaps in a toxic relationship, being pulled into a toxic relationship. We won't be able to cover the recovery process, the after dating aspect in detail. I'll just talk about the basic phases of how we can recover and what we can expect and what we cannot expect. And then very quickly, I want to cover basics of prevention, and which includes boundary setting. All right, so before I get into the, I don't know, 35 or 40 slides, I would love to hear from you what you understand as the narcissist empath trauma, perhaps even experiences that you have made yourself, if you think you have dated a narcissist or been married or still are, um, and things that we can then use for, um, not examples, but you know what I mean, things that we can refer to while we are talking about some of the more detailed aspects. Is anybody courageous enough to share here with us? Anyone who has had? Let's start another with testing a function here that the webinar software offers us, and that is the raise your hand function. In your control panel, there's a little hand sign, and you can use this, to let me know. Like if I say, okay, we're going to test this right now. Raise your hand if you think that you have been in the past or still are in a relationship with someone whom you would call narcissistic. Raise your hand if you were or are in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic, in your view, like how you understand narcissism. Okay, this is half of us. Raise your hand. You can lower your hand now, so this is working. Raise your hand if you think that you have been exposed to narcissism, perhaps maybe as a child, where you see, the things, narcissistic traits, or the feeling of being with people who are, basically just kind of sucking you dry, where you feel, emotional, energetic vampires, people who feel sort of very draining, very exhausting to you as an energetically sensitive or empath. So people whom you may not identify as narcissists, but people whom you feel extremely draining, especially, say, family members. Yeah, so this is like a good, 30%. Oh, there's more. Okay, this is actually more than half of us. Okay, this is interesting. So roughly half of us have identified that they must have been or still are in a relationship with a narcissist. And roughly 60% of us have identified that they have been in somehow exposed to, say, people who felt extremely emotionally, energetically draining, starting from childhood up. Yes. Yeah, this is very interesting. So this round here of people, the circle of people here, and you can lower your hands now, is comprised, of course, of people who are already in the process of wanting to heal, of wanting to do something about those things, but perhaps who have difficulties contextualizing things. So I would love to hear from you if there's anybody out there who's willing to share in a non-judgmental way. And if you don't introduce yourself by name, then I won't call your name, so you can stay anonymous. What your experiences are, either as a child or as a grown-up. Lines are open, guys.
I will attempt to share a little bit.
Okay.
I'm a little bit raw right now. I did have to just yesterday. I had a court-appointed meeting where I had to be, in a closed space with, a partner who had, abused me in this way for a really long time. And the one thing that I can say is having to go back into that dynamic is that I've done a lot of inner work and I've been on this journey, but how quickly I can go into that scary space, and where I feel like I was transported years ago, where my right to exist, to be heard, or to even be a person that can belong and support myself is challenged, and what that feels like. All the work I've done, and it's been over 24 hours, and I'm having a hard time kind of reclaiming myself. But the one thing that is most prominent to me is to remember that, wow, I used to feel like this all the time, every day. And for the past few years, I haven't anymore. So now I can see the contrast. What also makes me, the head game that used to make me feel unworthy or confused about everything, life in general, it's clearer to see that now, and that why I was so confused. And also this meeting was right on the heels of trauma work that we just did in the past couple of days. But it's not just energy draining, and it's not just an attack, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's like full body.
Identity. Yeah, it's your entire sense of self.
It's my entire sense of self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you're sharing is, and thank you. I mean, this is maybe a little heavy here to start out with, but it's perfect in that way, because this is really how it feels like. You have just demonstrated to us what, and I don't want to label it, but it's trauma that you have just shared with us. Okay, we can feel your trauma, right? And there are some details, of course, that are missing here for those listening. I know the details of that, not of the recent event, but of, sort of what led up to that. And I can only say thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing. I'm witnessing your trauma. I'm witnessing it, and I'm validating it.
It does feel good to know now at least that I can say it.
Yes,
That
this
makes
is
a difference.
life shadowing. It is, and it is very specific, if I may share that aspect, when there's children involved, even more so.
Yeah.
Okay, because we see, how this replicates, how this just never seems to end. And what you so perfectly demonstrated here for us is this trapped feeling. So even though you have done so much work, and I can attest for that, I've witnessed that too. Thank you for having been able to witness that. This is the characteristic of trauma, that we can get re-traumatized in a split second. Okay, it's a wound, and that wound needs time to heal. Okay, this has nothing to do with how good we are, how much we have worked, how hard we try. This is something that this wound needs to be closed, and the glue, that puts us back together as a self, that has to be formed from within. And of course, when there is constant outer, like exposure or re-traumatizing, that's difficult. That's just like with a cut, that builds a scab, and the scab gets ripped off. There's a lot of scar tissue that forms around that. And energetically, that is the case. That can be seen in a person. So I want you to understand that this has nothing to do with how well or how good you have already worked through, the understanding and accepting and so forth. No, that is a physiological response that we have. And letting it out and sharing it and taking action is the first, big step to releasing all this excess energy in us. Because if we don't release it, it kind of forms these sort of tiny little time bombs, that can be, little mines in us, energetic mines that can be tripped. Okay. So yes, this is very, very challenging, the situation that you go through. Okay. And at this point, I love the way you've contextualized this. All you can do is see how far you've come, that you have made it out, and that you recognize how you felt like this for like what, 15 years every day,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how now you see how not normal that is to feel that way, and how you don't ever want to feel that way again.
Yes.
So there's something positive in that, namely that there is healing, there is recovery. There is just when you're forced, especially when it's court ordered, and when you don't feel heard, there's very little you can do here in this current legal system, except for retreating or making it, becoming just as sort of mean in a way, to expose the other in a way that can be threatening for the children then again. So if there's any listeners here who have children who have experiences with this trauma, call it a narcissist or not, and children involved, there is often not much that can be done except for the inner work, the inner healing work, and sharing this with your children, giving your children as much support and being present with them and education as you can, and wait till they're old enough and validate them from their point of view so that the exposure does not traumatize them as it did for you. And so then helping our children can become part of our healing process. This is like, a little bit aside here, but it can become a healing process as we are life parenting our children, giving them what we would have needed. when we were in this situation. And this can also help us to heal, can help us to reconnect with those skills that are needed, to coach ourselves through, those things such as being belittled, being crazy made, and so forth. We're going to look into the details here today, but I want you to know that there are situations where all this sounds really good in theory, but when you're standing in front of a perpetrator in court, this is a very difficult to maintain your own composure. So this is not a failure or a relapse, okay? This is not failure. This is a physiological reaction. Your body is reacting to the trauma that you've experienced, and that's okay, okay? So go in your body, connect with your body, tell your body that it's okay, that, you know, you take these next couple days to just help your physiology, if that makes sense, to calm down. Okay.
Yeah, it does. It feels like on 24 hours I've been still just a live shaking wire.
Yeah.
And I know all the breathing techniques. I know,
Mm-hmm.
but my body is going to do this, and it's going to do it till the end.
Yes. So one of the main characteristics about trauma is that there's an actual physiological wiring that exists. Okay. And this is beyond our conscious control. This is not controllable through the brain. Okay, this is all in our limbic system. And I know that you know what this means. So all you can really do is to help your body on this most fundamental level: sleep, water, nutrients, rest, like anything that can calm it, anything that can ground it, anything that can center, your nervous system. Okay, until you get to this place where you feel that you found your sense of self again. Okay. And then you can deal with some of the consequences or with some of the things that need to be dealt with or that you want to work with. But until then, just really focus on your physiology, giving your nervous system a rest, like setting aside all these thoughts and all these emotions, not as in dissociating from them, but putting them aside and say, okay, I cannot, in the state that I am in right now, I cannot deal with them. I have to get my system, my nervous system, as well as my energy body, into a place where I'm feeling I'm in it again. Okay. And so that has to be priority for the next couple of days, 48 hours. So don't expect too much from yourself there, because you won't really be able to come up with beneficial solutions. All right.
Okay.
And then let's talk. Okay. You and I.
I think that would be a great idea.
But give yourself another 24, 48 hours, okay, to just physically calm down, to just get yourself into a more sort of less stressed place. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And there was a lot of comments while you were sharing. And this is, of course, we're all energetically sensitive and empaths here. So, yeah, I hope this hasn't triggered too much in you guys. But if it has triggered something in you, um, please share with us. This kind of desperation is something that it's part of my daily business. Okay, dealing with empaths, and it's a big part of this whole healing process. Yes, yes, and there's a lot of people who are sending you their hearts, who comment on your courage, being so brave, and they wish they could give you something, a hug or something.
Thank you.
Mm. Yes, and especially when you said here, one listener is commenting, "You're right to be here." That got triggered in the other person. So Yeah. Okay. So a lot of people sending you love, just so you know. Um, Thank you guys for being there for another. Okay, this is part of the healing power of sharing. I didn't expect that we would get there within the first 5 minutes, but this is due to you knowing how to share and understanding the power of that. Okay, so thank you once more, for giving this to us. When you feel that you are in that place where you've lost this entire sense of self and you don't know anymore where you are, who you are, you question your sanity, you question your right to be here. Energetically is a very, very low state, and in this low state, guys, it's no use to trying to ruminate or trying to figure this out with your mind. This is hardwired to your physiology. So you need to like work with your nervous system, as in calming it down, sleeping, eating well, grounding yourself, breathing, and so forth. But to be 100% realistic here, you won't remember to meditate. In fact, you won't feel that you're able to meditate. In these very low places, the only thing that can help you out is human connection. Human connection. To talk to somebody, to share, to even be under people can be healing, like without even talking or connecting in any sense, just being surrounded by people can help. All right, so the number one rule when you go into this place of desperation triggered by this injustice or this a feeling of disappointment or trappedness or having been victimized, the number one rule is to not isolate. Okay, human connection, and of course human touch and all these things that we know about nurturing can help your energy to stabilize, and then you can talk about things that you do not need to explain with words. But I would still I would try to shift the energy here a little bit and hear from you guys if there are uh, any more examples from you, not to measure up here with the sharing that we had, but that you have made either in the past or currently in conjunction with something like an energetic vampire or emotional vampirism or narcissist. Who else wants to share? Well, everything feels kind of insignificant now.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, Jona. This is Robert.
Hey, Robert.
Um, okay, I'm going to try to be non-judgmental and short. So I I have some experience with a narcissist. If you recall from our talks, and what my experience was is, first of all, a lot of personal work. I just realized as I was writing some notes, a lot of personal work that I'd done in the past helped me deal with it because it was a completely new experience for me. So
To
a
be
lot of
with a narcissist, to be with a narcissist.
yeah, a lot of the spiritual work that I had done previously had made me strong and it helped me deal with it.
How did
Um,
you find out that you were dealing with a narcissist, Robert, if I may ask? What?
well, I just wrote a few things down. He kept me waiting around. It was a guy that I worked with, and I ended
Uh-huh.
up moving in and living with the guy. And he kept me waiting around. He always lied and bragged about his accomplishments to make him himself look special.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he would scream and yell and try to berate me, put me down when I challenged him, when I knew he was lying,
Mm-hmm.
or when he treated me like did something wrong to me, harmful to me. Um, and but I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why this person. To me, I was just really simple. People told me I was very monk-like. I did a lot of training, meditation stuff. I was on my own a lot. So when I encountered this person, I didn't understand why he was being so mean to me.
Okay.
And but I was still pretty objective about it and standing my ground. And at his heart, he was not very tough at all. You know, he would scare you away if he could, but I pretty much stood my ground a lot of times. I just didn't understand it. And finally, one of my mentors, who was a psychologist, just said, Robert, he has narcissistic disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked that up
Okay.
on YouTube, and it was exactly it. I mean, he did not know the difference between fantasy and reality.
Okay.
And he would argue violently, I mean, loudly, if he was challenged,
Yep.
and make up lies. It's like they've got this weird way of making up these lies that, like, if you challenge them, it's like the worst thing ever. You know, it's like they can make up lies on the fly. Um, so, and then the only thing I could do is just get away. There's no
Okay.
arguing with it, or fixing it, or arguing, or making a. There's no making a point.
Right.
You just have to go away and not be there.
Thank you
Uh,
for sharing that. There was one thing that was extremely poignant about what you said, and that was you didn't understand why he was so mean to you, right? I mean, you weren't in a romantic relationship with him. You were in a work relationship, and then later in a roommate type of relationship. But you did not understand why he was so mean to you. This, Robert, is a very, very common confusion in empaths in conjunction with people who show narcissistic traits or this emotional vampirism. And we'll go a little deeper into this, but this is very important. I want all of you to take note of this, because what an empath will do is it will try to find out why, because we simply cannot imagine. We cannot imagine that somebody would do this on purpose or for no reason. Okay, and I'm not saying that all narcissists are, evil people and do this on purpose for no reason, because there are reasons. They have been victimized as well, but there is something that is not there, and that is the empathy. And so when we talk about narcissist empath trauma, what we're talking about is the trauma between somebody who's empathetic and somebody who's not. Somebody who has a belief, a mindset that I'm not going to do things to other people that I don't want to have done to me, right? As a golden rule, so to speak, at least knowingly. I mean, we all make mistakes, we all hurt people sometimes, but we feel regret, we feel remorse, and sometimes we even, if we do this self work that you mentioned, Robert, we have no problems with standing up to it and taking responsibility for it, and perhaps even go back and make amends and say, hey, dude, I'm really sorry. I didn't see this, or I really, was in a bad place or whatever. I overreacted. I take responsibility. I'm accountable for myself, and I'm sorry. This is something you will never hear a narcissist say. And that is because of exactly what you just showed to us, Robert, because they don't feel that they did anything wrong. The very piece that we cannot understand is that this remorse piece, this piece in us that comes in that says, if I feel this out from the other person's point of view, I can see why they got upset or blah blah blah, and I truly didn't, I didn't mean to hurt them, okay, but it happened. And to feel something like, I don't want to be this person that hurts other people. What we don't understand is that what we now are starting to sort of crystallize here is, that there are many different ways to name it. We just call it narcissist for simplicity's sake. We'll go into the deeper definitions here in a little bit. But what we cannot understand is that a narcissist really doesn't have that peace, doesn't have this peace, thinking about what it makes the other person feel like. And that is not because they're mean, that is because they can't. Okay? If this is something at this point here of our sharing, just sort of contextualizes the overall problem a little bit. Okay, let's just call it this way. Okay, there's a piece there that is not there. Now there are forms of narcissism that are openly malignant, where and there's also phases that a narcissist can go through, where this goes from just sort of pure ignorance to wanting to damage another person. Okay, but those things are the things that even for us as empaths are obvious. Okay, so evil people we can spot, but our biggest trap is to not being able to fathom that there are people out there who do not who are not empathetic. Raise your hand if you are one of those people, and this includes myself, who always sees the good in people, who knows that there's bad in people, and I see the bad in people too, but I still choose to believe in the good in people. Raise your hand. Who of you unshakingly, irrevocably chooses to believe in the good in people? Yes, this is almost all of us. Okay. And this is not a naivete. This has to do with our faith, with our belief, and with our mindset. Okay, so we understand that there is, good and bad in every person, but we believe that, there is something in people that, can actually be activated. In conjunction with a narcissist, this is tricky. The reason why this is tricky is that what this belief is based on is our feeling that we have for also the respect and the connection that we have with our feeling, and the connection that we have with other people's feelings. Psychologically, the definition of narcissism is the absence of that feeling and the absence of empathy altogether. So the big characteristic here, if we just look at sort of very not very detailed, just like sort of simplistic view, the differences between an empath and a narcissist is that they are on the scale of empathy, they're on the extreme ends of it. Okay, so the empath feels emotions, his or her own and other people's emotions, often to the degree that they cannot differentiate between what is theirs and what isn't, which is a problem in itself. And the narcissist, just as this simplistic view here, we just call it narcissist. I'm not making a psychological diagnosis. I'm just calling it like the typo that we talk about. The narcissist on the extreme other end of the scale, who is unable to connect with feelings, their own or other people's feelings. The reason why I like to approach it this way is because it brings in a bit more neutrality. And I like, Robert, how you made that comment in the beginning where you really try to be non-judgmental. It's very difficult to stay judgment-free when it comes to talking about narcissism, because there's often so many hurt feelings and so much trauma involved in what has led us to believe, to see, that we have been, victimized by a narcissist, that it's sometimes difficult to not demonize or vilify this. But I would like to here in this workshop bring neutrality in many different ways, but without diminishing the trauma itself. Yes. So we do have to work with our experiences in a way that we feel that they can be valid, they can be, they can be heard. But we need to be careful to not go into this binary or dualistic place with it and vilify other people because they're showing narcissistic or egotistical behavior.
I've got,
Mhm.
oh, I just got a little piece at the end of that for me. On my side of the street, I was having a problem finding purpose in my life and like finding a career and a job and supporting myself. So that's what got me hooked up with that kind of person, was thinking that somebody else would give me a purpose and give me something to do and it helped me out. So that's what I took from that.
Thank you, Robert. This is actually a really important aspect here. So on the one hand, we have the validation and the witnessing and the being heard and actually realizing that we have been traumatized in a way, but also the insight that there must be a part in us, and that, like the way we call this in energy work is that externalizes, that somehow makes the sense of self dependent on others or on external, that has set us up for that has somehow made us susceptible for that. Okay. And we also have, while we are, in this place of trying to figure all this out, right? It's normal that the pendulum then goes into the other direction and kind of vilifies that a little bit. But we also need to, of course, beware, ourselves from making excuses or making or justifying the narcissist behavior, because like you've so beautifully demonstrated, Robert, in your conclusion, there really isn't a solution. There isn't a way to work through this with the other person. So when we have an empath and when we have a narcissistic person, it's kind of like when you put an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic together in a relationship. There is no solution. Okay. But when you put two alcoholics together, at least they can drink together, and then there is no inequality. But when you have a person who, tries to get validation from the other, and you have a person who tries to seek to take away validation from the other, then this is like water and oil. This won't mix. Okay, there will always be a victim. There will always be somebody who will feel traumatized in the end. And so the best prevention here really is educating ourselves on it, becoming better at reading early signs, and knowing what to do and what not to do, okay, before it's too late. And there's so many comments here. Thank you, everybody, for commenting. Yes, and here is a comment that is extremely fitting. It's a total mindfuck when you, as an empath, can feel the pain of a narcissist and then feel sorry for them and then end up enabling them. This is a wonderfully expressed. The conflict and the confusion that empaths can get into with narcissistic behavior is that we can feel the pain, we can feel the emptiness, we can feel what makes someone to lash out or to become narcissistic in their behaviors, and feel sorry for them. But at the same time, we also feel sorry for us. Okay, and that then leads to this very difficult, convoluted kind of place where we keep bouncing back and forth with the end result, though, and let's not forget that, with the end result that there is that we feel empty. So one of the common traits, and I want to move forward here with the slides a little bit. One of the very, very common traits of relationships let's just like slowly use this terminology, but without judgment, okay? An empath narcissist relationship is characterized by one very significant trait, and that is something that people can see from the outside. Over time, so the longer this relationship goes on, and this also counts for any toxic relationship, the narcissist starts feeling better about themselves, starts getting better with things, starts building stronger financial stability, a stronger sense of self, better health, and all that comes with that, better self-care routines, and just literally a better sense of self. And the empaths will feel less of it, all the way to physical illness. So a lot of times it actually takes an empath to realize that the relationship isn't healthy when there is a point of a complete utter physical well, okay, so maybe a little bit extreme, but strong physical symptoms, onset of chronic illnesses. But here you see some general symptoms of trauma, recurring recollection, obviously, persistent avoidance or denial mechanisms, numbing, apathy, non-responsiveness, depression, hyper stress, overreactivity, irritability, inability to control body emotions or thoughts, issues with any kind of relations and connections with others. There could be anything from hiding, withdrawing, withholding, and so forth. Powerlessness, helplessness, feeling overwhelmed, a very high pain threshold, and a distorted reality, meaning a sense of normal. This last point here, this distorted reality, this distorted sense of normal, is what really gets to us. Yes, and I'm reading your sharing here. Yes, and thank you for adding this, that these physical symptoms that I talked about that you can observe in victims is something, that could be qualified as PTSD. So if there are psychologists here, therapists, we'd probably call this more like CPTSD, like complex PTSD, because it's ongoing, it's pervasive. But you can literally see this, especially in these relationships where they take longer, where one starts feeling better and better and the other starts getting sicker and sicker. Yes, all the way to organs shutting down, fibromyalgia. Yes, 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 and yes. Yeah. And you went through all this today. Yeah. Yes, there's so many of you. I'm just reading your comments here. Yes, and this is the other thing. Thanks for sharing this. I kept thinking that I would get better if I just try harder, right? If I just, do this, if I just change this, if I just work on myself more, then I will get better, right? This is a typical symptom of being traumatized, guys. This has to do with this distorted sense of reality, this distorted sense of normal. Our pain threshold is so high that we're actually not realizing how, forgive me my language here, but how fucked up this is. Okay, and we're still trying. We're still trying. Who of you guys has found themselves in a situation, whether you label it narcissism or not, where you felt so trapped, and and even though you kind of knew that it was, sort of, that there was no real solution, you kept on trying because you were hoping that it would get better one day. And if you just stuck it out, if you just tried harder, if you just did more, or if he would just get better, yes, if he would just find a better job, make more money, stop drinking, get this or that it would be different next time. Yes. Yep. Show me your hands, guys. Yes, that's like 20% of us. And this can even, these things can also apply to situations or relationships with people who are not necessarily narcissists, but who, who say take drugs, who use alcohol, who use antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, who have mental health issues, even physical health issues. You know, people who are in severe states, whatever the cause or whatever has triggered this in them, can exhibit these narcissistic traits and behaviors. So, you know, when you're with somebody who's suicidal all the time, or depressed all the time, you know, or very strongly sort of jumping back and forth, you know, either this extreme or that extreme, you know, this can still, you know, cause the exact same trauma in us. Yes. Yes. In the end, you just, yes. And this is the thing. In the end, you just ended up cleaning the house, being his butler, you know, basically enabling. Okay. So there's a new term that is forming right now. It's not a clinical term, but co-narcissism, just like in the sense of codependency with alcohol or substance abuse. Okay, so what are the energetic problems with trauma? The energetic problems with trauma are, you know, as you can see, quite severe. Lack of self-worth, strong self-bashing, and this like persistent, pervasive sense of being flawed, being separated from self. Okay, that's, you know, sort of probably the strongest trauma that we are experiencing here. Because you know, when we feel there's a lot that we can endure, but when we feel innately flawed and absolutely sort of worthless of being here, we had the right to be here earlier, you know, when that is questioned or challenged, you know, this can really make us feel you know, proverbially like a piece of shit. Okay. Control, guilt, and shame issues. And with it, often these blind spot type of self-sabotage mechanisms that we're not even aware of. Okay. A distorted sense of self. We had a beautiful demonstration of this today and wonderfully expressed. That also distorts our sense for our own needs, our own desires, and our own wants. And this makes us very schismatic. Okay, it triggers, you know, our ego survival mechanisms, and you know, basically keeps us in this constant fight of just wanting to be validated in our sense of self, that we completely ignore, you know, sort of what our desires are, what our wants are. So this goes hand in hand with this undeservingness, the deservingness issues and the self-worth issues. Dissociation, numbness, and you know, not feeling all together. You know, issues with empathy. This is a huge problem. It's almost a generational problem now. As we see these the increasing numbers of energetically sensitives and empaths. Okay, we're also seeing increasing numbers of dissociation and numbness, where people check out from their feeling altogether. So this, that's why a lot of empaths actually perceive their empathy as a curse. And we'll get to that, what we can do about this and why we even have this. Shutting down our inner sensitivity or hypersensitivity, you know, not wanting to feel, not wanting to sense. Who of you, raise your hand, who of you at some point in their lives made this decision, consciously or unconsciously, but literally didn't want to feel anything, didn't want to sense anything, didn't want to feel this bombardment, and kind of shut this down? For many of us, this happens when we're a child, so it's not like a conscious type of thing. Yeah, this is like, yeah, like 25% of us, myself included. Oh, no, it's more. It's half of us. Okay. Yeah, so at some point, being completely overwhelmed and drained by our own energetic sensitivity and shutting it down, or becoming this like super hypersensitive type of person. Depression, anxiety, pessimism, victimhood, and an overall low vibe, an overall low vibratory, negative, pessimistic, sometimes even apocalyptic and doom and gloom, you know, type of attitude and outlook on life as a result of trauma, guys. extreme passivity, lack of assertiveness, or the other ends of both here. All these aspects can also come in the other extreme, or like an over assertiveness. But you know, this passivity can lead to us, you know, either on the one hand to completely sort of absorb everything that is around us and just suck it up, or you know, we do the opposite, you know, sometimes overtly, sometimes covertly, and we manipulate or we fantasize, we project ourselves. So it can be both. Fear of abandonment and codependency is a very strong side effect of, you know, energetic behaviors. As issues with self-love usually come from this when this fear of abandonment is triggered. Astral fascination, etheric fascination, wanting to explore the mystical, and also the problems that come with that, getting stuck there. They often develop as a result of a karmic trauma attachment. Issues with our, sort of shielding with our etheric vulnerability. Having this fascination with going into OBEs and visioning and wanting to like the psychic, the ESP, and ego traps that are there, implants and shadow aspects show here very strongly in people that were traumatized. And then last but not least, a very strong fragmentation in their energy body that affects their aliveness and their vitality altogether, often leading to a complete rejection of wanting to be human. Okay, those are some of the energetic problems: separation, self-sabotage cycles, schisms, empathy issues, awareness issues, low vibratory, entrapment, projection, manipulation, fantasizing, self-love issues, astral fascination, implants, and fragmentation. Those are things that can develop as a consequence of trauma, PTSD, if you will, but also epigenetic or karmic attachments. Yes, I get a lot of comments here from you guys, and yes, and I think yes, one comment here summarizes this. It is so exhausting. Yes, I was just sharing here really from our energy work practice what we see with people with trauma, and here this goes a little more into the detail of this. This may you all may not be familiar with all these energy centers, chakras and chakra fields, but this gives you a very good overview. And the biggest, or the number one damage to our energy system or effect on our energy system is issues with our heart chakra. Okay. Trauma closes our heart chakra, or sometimes in the other extreme can enlarge it and lead to undetected continued absorption. Okay, but this is one of the biggest issues. This is like more than half the population, okay, has that. So we all know that pain is something that comes as a result of living, and that there's no real escape, and that resilience is what helps us to develop happiness and fulfillment. But when you just look at it with the microscope on the energies of a person, there are some commonalities that we can find, how trauma in general affects a person's energy body. We can read this. Jeff can see this when he's doing clearings and so forth. And we can basically conclude a lot of things from reading out your energy system this way. But there are some specific aspects that come in with narcissistic abuse syndrome or narcissistic victim disorder. Does anybody want to share here at this point? Or ask any question? We have a few open mics. If this is a mistake, just mute your microphone so we don't have your background noises in the recording. Then I'm just going to do this for you. Okay. All right. So what is the narcissistic abuse syndrome or narcissistic victim disorder? Okay. So first of all, this leads us now into the deeper aspects of what does it feel like when you have had this narcissistic abuse trauma, or when you're still experiencing this. So common narcissistic or narcissist abuse symptoms are, and those are excessive, and when it's in conjunction with an empath multiplied. Okay, so feeling alone, feeling abandoned, feeling unheard, feeling unrecognized, feeling empty all the time. Feeling insane, can't do anything right, feeling exhausted, drained, feeling trapped and worthless. Feeling, feeling left with a lost sense of self, lost connection to own needs and wants, not good enough, always feel the need to change, because obviously, you're convinced that something isn't working, something isn't right about you, you're flawed. Persistent anxiety, constant bombardment, inner and outer, constantly feeling like you're walking on eggshells, and constantly either fixated on something or feeling that your thoughts and emotions are getting hijacked. This last point here, can you guys relate to this? Do you know what I mean with this? What it feels like when your energies get hijacked or your attention gets hijacked? It's like a fixation, yes, but it almost feels like you're not doing this on purpose. It just happens. Okay, so some of you can relate to this. This is a very specific trait in narcissistic relationships. Okay, there's, toxic relationships can do this too, but this one is very specific. And this happens on many different levels, on the physical, emotional, mental, or intellectual, and energetic level. It's this constant, something keeps pulling you into thinking about the narcissist, how they will see this, how they will like this, how sort of what they will say about this, and so forth. There's this constant, I mean, you don't even want to, but it's constantly constant mental and emotional looping, backpedaling, especially, and relapsing. So this shows in inconsistent boundaries, especially. So you say no, and and then they turn into a rage beast. They threaten you, or they give you a silent treatment or whatever, and then you say okay, whatever, you like some of that what Robert shared with us here, where there was this like real big drama, and just to like prevent all this drama, because you just want peace, then you just go back in it. Inconsistent boundaries, and sometimes even justification. Guys, this is a really, really red flag, really big red flag with yourself. If you find yourself justifying your own behaviors that you cannot approve of, this is showing you that you are incongruent with yourself. When you are doing something where you feel like you got pulled into doing something and it wasn't quite all right for you on some level, but you're finding justifications for it. Oh, he just did this because, or, well, at first I was like, no, but then, when I saw how it hurt his feelings or whatever, then, stuff like that. A really big flag, a red flag. Focusing on pleasing, mostly due to wanting to avoid conflict or out of anxiousness, trying to maintain peace. Compromise personal integrity. This goes in line with what I just made, the examples that I just made with this ghost father. This is literally, coercing you into behavior that you disapprove of. This can go, into, exploring stuff like even drugs or alcohol or sexual behaviors that, you would never otherwise feel attracted to. You're just doing this, to either impress the other or to somehow harmonize with them, and then feeling guilty and shameful afterwards. Also, this constant ruminating about that, how you feel incongruent with yourself. And also another really, really big red flag, strong, critical inner voice. Victims of narcissist abuse are left with an extremely strong inner critic, an enlarged superego, if you will. Yes, in response to justification, I've often felt like I was being used as their tool for manipulating others, and justified it to myself in many, many ways. Thank you for sharing that. That is exactly what I was referring to. And you somehow feel it, but you are not strong enough in that moment to step out and say, no, I'm not doing that, or I don't want to do that, because this is making me part of it, or this is making me enable this, because you're afraid. Yes, feeling incongruent with self. This takes a lot of work to get to that place, to not just to see this, but actually to step out of this. Anyone who has had a relationship with with someone who abuses alcohol or drugs knows this. Anyone with a strong addictive structure, when you're in a relationship with someone with a strong addictive structure, it's the same thing. There comes a point where you realize that by you not stepping up, by you not leaving the relationship or the situation, you're actually becoming part of it. This is something, this is this nagging feeling of guilt and shame within. So while, a part of our psychology is trying to avoid confrontation, trying to avoid conflict, and this sort of disharmonic situation, we are actually absorbing this disharmony internally, and now this conflict takes place within ourselves. Yes, and then eventually, we try things, whether it's like with bosses or with parents or with partners. We're trying to fly under the radar. I like how you said that, to avoid being their target. Yes, so that is actually a very common phenomenon when you have been raised in a narcissistic family constellation. And I want to talk about this just a little bit here, because as you can see, it gets more and more complex the farther we go. Another common symptom is trying to prove that you can do better, trying harder, and being in this constant weird place of reward punishing confusion, as I call this. Like you think you're doing good and you try harder, and actually you feel like you're getting more punished for the harder you try or the better you try to become. So there is something like a rewiring that takes place in a narcissist empath relationship, where you doing better actually gets punished, and you doing worse gets rewarded, because the narcissist receives an elevation through when you go low, okay, and does not want you to be happy, does not want you to do better. So there's a transference that takes place, which is very toxic in that way. Yes, many years after recovering from this type of relationship, my ego mind still likes to dip into the shame of it. Yes, and now you can giggle about it when you hear your ego. I suppose you're referring to justifying and so forth. Or like going into the self beat up, why you let it come that far and stuff like that. Yes, guys, there's no point in beating yourself up over the past. The reason why you let it come that far is because you couldn't see it. It's that simple. It becomes tricky when you start seeing it and you're still fragmented. That's why it requires recovery, and we're going to look into this here in a minute. What this is comparable with the recovery process. Yes, and that's the thing here. Yes, and exactly. This is the part of learning to be your true self again. Because in such a relationship, what happens is that you sell yourself out and you become something that you're not. Yes. And psychologically, it's a transference of the narcissist pathology, which is the lack of empathy and lack of sense of self to you. And this part is actually strategic. So an empath would do this strategically and consciously, not consciously to hurt you, but consciously to get what you have. Okay. And therefore, this phenomenon that I mentioned earlier, where you can see that over time, the narcissist seems to get better and better, and the empath seems to get worse and worse. This transference is like an identity swap has taken place, to elevate the narcissist and to lower the empath. I know what this sounds like. And there's no judgment in saying this because this can be observed energetically, this mechanism. And obviously, there's a covert manipulation. So that manipulation then, is something that actually we begin to do as well. So a typical narcissist abuse symptom that is not on this list, but has to do with this last point, is that the victim starts questioning themselves to the point that they're thinking they're the narcissist. Who of you has had or still is, or questions this right at this minute, whether you have been narcissistic? Please raise your hand. I want to see some numbers here. My hand is raised as well. Who of you has ever questioned that you're narcissistic? Like, deep in your heart you're not, but you look at your behavior and you're like, oh shit, this is not that much different. Okay, this is more than half of us. Yes. Okay, so here, yes, you've had those thoughts. Oh my God, yes. Okay, I want to let you guys know that it's of course a bit more complex, but there are some indications. The mere fact that you're questioning whether you were narcissistic or not actually disqualifies you from being a narcissist, because that is one of the questions that a narcissist will never raise, ever. Because the narcissist doesn't think that there is anything wrong with it. Can we show narcissistic traits? And this is now the point where we really have to clean up with this. Yes, that wonderful, you calling it exactly what it is. You caught yourself mirroring their behavior, and that was eye-opening. But the mirroring is not just something that you do because it's been modeled to you. Obviously, when you are in a relationship for like 15 or 20 years or whatever, then you start getting used to that dysfunctionality, that because your sense of normal gets messed with. But I also want to remind you that a lot of us present here have been raised by narcissistic parents, and so we have been primed to allow this transference of pathology to occur from happening, simply because this is what has been going on pretty much all our lives. And there is a setup there, an energetic setup that can come through narcissistic parenting, where we will end up displaying narcissistic behaviors, egotistical behaviors that we were modeled as a child, and at the same time codependent behavior. So we'll get to this. You can see that if you look at things from an energetic point of view, there is some other aspects that come in than just psychology. Okay, let's at this point here real quick define what a narcissist is and what narcissistic personality disorder is. So psychology has listed, as a diagnosis, a disorder that's called narcissistic personality disorder, and that comes with 9 to 10 traits. And if you sort of test positive on 4 or more of those, then you can be diagnosed as someone with narcissistic personality disorder. And the simplest traits, that I guess we can all sort of agree on. Let me fast forward here because we have to cut this short, are grandiosity in all ways. I mean, everything is extreme, everything is big, everything is 100% good, 100% bad, that like themselves or other people. There's no gray areas, there's no growth, there's no, it's just like that. Often comes with a complete utter lack of empathy and verbal bullying, so making other people bad, while at the same time maybe praising them up to the zoo, and then next moment putting them down and completely nullifying them. Entitlement, specialness, making everything about them. Huge fantasies, huge promises, grandiose fantasies. This also comes as a form of like saving the world and so forth. A general superficiality and a fixation on appearance, like what do the neighbors think, how do the others see me, our family, obviously seeing everything, like my husband, my children, my car, my house, as an extension of my sense of self, because it's completely externalized. Avoiding expression of feelings altogether. So a true feeling you won't get out of a narcissist. If you ask them about their feelings, they will very quickly distract. They will very quickly distract and talk about superficial things. No emotional regulation. The regulation, the internal regulation, can only happen through externals. This is one of the strongest symptomology here of a narcissist. There is no internal regulation. Seeking admiration, at the expense and exploitation of others. Very jealous, very hovering, very controlling behaviors, crushing behaviors, sometimes, and really arrogant towards others, towards inferiors, towards, like typical things, road rage, but even more so typical, like, really talking down to service people and so forth. One of the things that we can see as empaths that will stick out for you when we talk a little more about this is this here. This is something you can not understand. For a narcissist, other people are either up there, godlike, if they identify somebody else as better as themselves, they put them up there on a pedestal and get fixated on becoming exactly like it and taking it away from the other by taking it away from it, or they are completely annihilating a person, like as if they don't even exist. As a matter of fact, from a psychological point of view, they do not exist. So there is no object consistency. This is what this is called in psychology, meaning that when the empath, when the narcissist realizes that a person is below them or that they have flaws, that they're not, basically worthy of their attention, they literally don't exist. This has something to do with our infant relation to our caregivers. There is no bond, that goes beyond what is right in front of you and what you can get right now. Okay, there's something the empath does not understand. We cannot understand this because for us, and this is actually sort of on the other end of the scale, the problem for us, somebody else, we can always see the good and the bad simultaneously. And, we can feel a bond to a person even when they're really, really low. Okay, actually, we feel almost more attracted to them when they feel really, really low. And so this is like really on the opposite end of that symptomology, if you will. Yes, I like how you share this here. Yes, appearance. This guy was so GQ. I don't know if you guys all know what this means. It's a men's magazine, sort of celebrating male vanity. Yes. So vanity, obviously, and so there's sort of things that we can observe in social media and media, reality TV series that are basically giving sort of narcissism an international stage now. those things have led to all this becoming more apparent, all this coming out more into public, and people becoming more aware of this. Also, the fact that they are with a narcissist, okay? But these are sort of the basic traits of a narcissist. A narcissist is not necessarily a psychopath or a sociopath, but it can go there. There's different types of narcissism. There's obviously the malignant narcissist. This would be like the typical sort of sociopathic, serial killer type of narcissist. Then you can have the overt narcissistic, grandiose person, like some prominent examples right now in politics here in the United States, or textbook examples of overt, narcissists. They don't really try to hide the fact that they are narcissistic. They don't think there's anything wrong with this. They naturally assume that everybody wants to be like them, and they will always try to get everything from people that they admire in some ways, or their traits. They will try to get them. It's like absorbing other people's superpowers. That's kind of like what this feels like. And then there's the covert narcissist. That is a very tricky form, and something that is very common and very toxic. And that is, sort of the typical white shadow person, the churchgoer, the people that are very engaged in groups, in churches, in societies, like associations, even nonprofit organizations. This fixation on the outer appearance, leads to this sort of really sort of squeaky clean a type of appearance on the outside, but very controlling on the inside, very empty on the inside, and really doing this whole narcissistic game in a very coverted way. So they will never say things like, I'm the best and you are, you're a piece of scum. They'll say, oh, I really like how you do this. I just wish you would be better in blah, blah, blah. Those are examples how covert narcissism happens, in this really sneaky way. And there's many, many ways how this comes across. Yes, the guru, the false guru, the white knight in shiny armor, Miss Goody Two Shoes, those are all very good examples. Here's a sharing, here's a chat. I always hear about being an extension of my narcissistic parent. From them, they take pride in my accomplishments and are disappointed in themselves for my failings, if that makes sense. This makes absolute sense. This is a typical sign. This is a typical behavior or phrase that you hear from a narcissistic parent is, what have I done wrong that my kids turned out to be such failures? Anybody heard this in their lives? It's a sign for narcissistic parents. And we can make a workshop on narcissistic parenting. I've done a video on that. Some of the secrets of family members can access that. I will publish this on YouTube probably in a couple of weeks. Signs that you were raised in a narcissistic family constellation. Okay, someone has called you narcissistic, but you don't think so. Okay, let's summarize. The fact that you're questioning it it's more an indication that you're not. Okay, and this is why I was talking about the transference of the pathology that happens when you're with a narcissist for a long time, or even haven't been raised by one. And by the way, these narcissistic parents or family constellations are often cult-like. They are extremely patriarchal or matriarchal in their structure. Siblings are getting pitted against another. There's constant triangulation. There's constant bad mouthing other people when they're not present, and then like talking nice to them and bad about the other person that just left the room. In family situations, family holidays, family gatherings often turn out to be extremely toxic events. often celebrating the greatness of the narcissist and really sort of annihilating, or them leaving. If it's not about them, then they usually storm off, to turn into a rage beast, and just leave the whole thing and destroy the whole gathering. Both extremes. But things, like having been pitted, having compared, having constantly been put under pressure to perform, those are typical signs of a narcissistic family constellation. And when you have been modeled that, also in its abusive form. So just so you know, statistically, sexual trauma is very prevalent in narcissistic family constellations. Family secrets, cover-ups, this pink elephant syndrome, that's constantly questioning your own reality. And perhaps the need to elevate or to point out your own accomplishments, because when you live with a narcissist, or when you grow up as a narcissist, the main thing that happens is that you are never being validated. You will never get that sense of you actually accomplished something, and oftentimes all going that as far as them claiming your successes. So what happens if you have a more of an assertive personality type is that you will feel the need to have to point this out at all times, like, I did this, and no, yeah, look at what I did. Plus the pitting of the siblings against another, and the constant comparing creates this overachievement, this need to perform, and to for like a little crumbles of approval, which can make a person sort of show signs of narcissism by constantly needing to point out what you did, what you can do. This is not the same as narcissism. Okay. Narcissistic personality disorder has to have some kind of sort of harming sense to the person themselves and the person around them. Okay, like persuasively, where it's impossible to function for the person with the narcissist, or the narcissist him or herself. Yes, another sharing here. Growing up with a coverted narcissistic mother is painful. Just now untangling the web of lies and confusion, bounce in and out of shame and guilt. Yes, this is very, very difficult when we begin to realize that, that our parents are a narcissist. Because, first of all, of course, the label is so connotated, and we have, that these really, these really strong opinions and judgments about narcissism, and it's hard for us to actually, say this about a parent. So we have to understand that, just like other behaviors, such as, drinking alcohol, or even codependency, those are behaviors that people show. And the thing with narcissism is that, yes, it's off the charts egotistical. We all have an ego, though. We all have our ego in its nature is narcissistic. I've said this on many occasions. So we all have a narcissism in us. But when somebody uses this narcissism to actually take something away from somebody else, I think this is the easiest way to see, and to realize that our parents, especially the own mother, does that to her own children and grandchildren, is very, very traumatic. It's very painful. The lies, unfortunately, yes, this is, where this distorted sense of self, this constant, like, doubting and judging ourselves, is coming from. Okay, you have been raised in a system, in a family system, that was not based on truth, that created an alternative reality, and that constantly projected things onto others, onto you. Yes. And this is a road of recovery. This is a process of recovery. And as far as like closure and reconciliation is concerned, you need a, I hope that you have a coach or a therapist, because you do need someone who can guide you through this. There's phases of recovery that we go through, and like we could witness here at the very beginning of the workshop in the sharing that you did. This kind of trauma can create, it can be triggered at any moment in a split second, okay? Especially when it's our parents, because it's hardwired in us. And just so you know, having been raised by narcissistic parents does do something to you. It does that trauma to you, okay? And therefore, you are either set up to be attracted to another narcissist as a partner, or even in a work situation. I mean, chances are that you find that this is so normal, and you accept this as with this distorted sense of normality and your extremely high pain threshold. You accept this as normal, that you don't even think there's anything wrong with it. But there's also an attraction in you. And and this can, and when this trauma goes too far, lead to you replicating narcissistic behaviors also to children, unfortunately. I mean, I know this is a bit judgmental, but I do see narcissism, just like alcoholism, as not only an intergenerational problem, but also viral. It replicates. We can see this in family karma, and it takes about 7 generations to get rid of it. Okay, so this is something that I could say is more of a positive effect now of us becoming better, energy workers, beginning to realize that we can take that power back, and that we can disrupt these energetic patterns in us, and therefore, that we don't have to wait 7 generations. Yes, it's very common to be accused of being a narcissist or covert narcissist by narcissists. That's very common as a part of the projection and the transference of the pathology from them. And we will feel like it because we will show signs of acting that way, mostly out of that sense of defending ourselves or protecting ourselves. Yes, great idea. Someone is making the suggestion to do a workshop on narcissistic parenting. I actually thought about this. We have done a workshop on conscious parenting, and I think this would fit right in. I think that's a great suggestion. I will take that into consideration for the April workshop. Thank you. Yes, so I'm reading all your comments, guys. Wonderful, wonderful sharing here. Yes, it's a claiming process, exactly, and it has to do with retaking this ownership, reclaiming this. Yes, I learned how to be a good undercover manipulator because I could get some of what I wanted, even though I could not break out of the whole system. Now, this is a really important part here that I will address in yes, this is your life story. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so common narcissist abuse tactics, and then we will stop here. We only have 18 minutes left. We will stop at probably the energetic similarities and differences between narcissists and empaths, which will then lead you with an inner reflection in the end that will bring back this neutrality, okay? Because some of the things that have to be pointed out in a slightly judgmental way so that we become aware of it. One of the major symptoms of our narcissistic abuse is that we cannot see it for what it is. We have a literal blind spot there. So when I go through these common narcissist abuse tactics, guys, I really, really want you to understand that not all of them are coming from a person that has a narcissistic personality disorder. Those are narcissistic abuse tactics. That means, someone who's very egotistical, very narcissistic in nature, but not necessarily a labeled, diagnosed narcissist, okay, behaviors. When you see narcissist traits that transfer playing in self, how do we deal with it and how do we heal it? Okay, yes. So This is obviously the part of the objective here of this webinar. All right, so let's do, because we got to rush through this a little bit, let's do the healing or the counter tactic with the abuse tactic. How does that work with you guys? If we just do that, if I say like this is a typical common tactic and this is what you can do against it, okay, because I have a separate a slide for that, but let's just do it right here. Okay. Okay, so one of yes, so they are not necessarily in a hierarchy. But they come as they appear, and they often come in different orders and in different degrees, making us feel negative about our self-care or self-love. Guys, this is something an empath does not understand. When you're with a narcissist, they really don't like it when you do things for yourself, because things that you do for yourself, they increase your happiness, they increase your your sense of self, your identity. They don't like it when you sort of read books that self-improvement books, or learn new things or whatever. It makes them feel smaller, and so they try to sabotage that, or go even as far as punishing you for that. Okay, this is something, I'll make an example here. My first husband literally forbid me to read certain books. Who of you has experienced that? Something like that. Or talking to a specific person, because every time you talk to that person, you come home a whole different person, and I don't want you to be that person. Like where they've literally didn't want you to do things that you felt were good for you. Yeah, so some of you have experience with that. Yeah, so this is coming from this place that there is when this other person does something for themselves, or when they go back and get a degree, or then it makes them feel smaller, and so they sabotage this in very coverted ways. What's the counter tactic to that? Obviously, and most of you already know this, the self-healing, self-care, self-love are they're the most fundamental, most basic needs and skills that we need to focus on to even have a sort of a sense of healthy living, of living and loving all together. And never, ever can you accept that when somebody tries to sabotage this. No, this often happens in a very sneaky way, like as in, saying, oh, we don't have the money for this, you can't do this. There are other things that are more important, and so forth. That's how this will usually come. But then when it's already that far, you literally have to make secret plans, on how you can do this anyway, or you just never put this up for discussion ever, like this is a given. Okay, this is what I do. Okay, push pull mechanisms, hurt and rescue plays or mechanisms. This is very, very common in a relationship with a narcissist. There is a constant push-pull. There is never a situation where you feel like you can just be. There always is either you being, completely sort of projected upon, and where they start to love bomb you, and where they just like make you feel like wonderful and the best person in the world, only in the next moment to pull the rug underneath your feet, and to make you feel like the worst person, and how could you, and you're not the person I fell in love with, and so forth. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yes, there's always a price tag in the end. I like how you said that. This is very much the feeling. But hurt and rescue is a specific form of that, and that is where, obviously this comes at a stage in a narcissist relationship where there already are patterns established, but where there is a complete annihilation, and where you are hurt, really, really deeply hurt, and you're like literally at this point of no return, and then they come back, and then they make you feel that they rescued you, that they were so good to you because they came back to you, and they are now helping you. How can I help you? And give you the feeling that you need them to recover. constant criticism, constant, oh, how can you prevent this from happening? Well, once you're in a push-pull mechanism, guys, all you need to do is pay attention to that. Examples are when every time when you're ready to leave and you're starting to distance yourself, or you're starting to let go of things, they're railing you in even harder, love bombing you even harder. So can you guys relate to that? It's like whenever you like literally come to this sense with yourself that you've had enough and you don't want this anymore, whether it's a job or a relationship, it's the same thing. Where you like, this is it, and they feel this, and then they come and reel you in with, yes, exactly, either empty promises or love bombing again, making you feel like the most wonderful person in the world. And yes, so this is the counter. Actually, okay, solutions. Here, somebody's asking about solutions in general. Solutions are not possible with narcissistic abuse. That's just like with alcoholic abuse or any other type of abuse. Okay, so any type of abuse, perpetrator victim situation, there's no solution to that other than to step out of it. And the victim obviously has to recover. But the main problem in narcissistic empath relationships is that the narcissist will never ever take responsibility for their actions. In fact, they lack that ability to actually even see the consequences of their actions. So you will also not actually find closure with narcissists, and this is something that in the recovery process, it's very important to understand that when you recover from the narcissist empath abuse syndrome, that you will not find closure. And actually, your willingness or your fixation on wanting to have closure is something that is being used against you and used to pull you back in. So you got to be very careful there. There is no closure with narcissists because they will not actually take responsibility for their actions. The only closure that you can find is that you have now the awareness of all of that, and that this has led to you exactly for you to being smarter now, for you to understanding the mechanisms better, and especially to understanding better what has set you up, and the, sort of your own shadow traits and your own parts in that, the parts that you need to own about this, that has basically enabled this. So there is a term now, I mentioned this in the beginning, called co-narcissism, just like codependency with addictive structure, why we stay in those relationships. Yes, yes. When you become strong enough, you can walk out of the without the closure. The closure is in you taking this as a prompting to do self-healing and actually entering your own self-discovery and self-healing process, and finally learning how to build your own sense of self and your own life without needing approval from the outside. That is your closure. Your closure is that you come out as a stronger, more aware, more conscious person, having learned, sort of a very important part about yourself that can pull you into toxicity, into your own shadow, into your own toxicity as well. We have to accept that. That is part of the healing process, because the empaths would try to find disclosure. This is why I mentioned this in the beginning. We cannot believe that somebody is like that. Yes, my suggestion is to self-prioritize. And it's really a rebuilding. It's first of all taking the power back to disrupt those cycles, but also to really focus on, what makes you you, and your inner connection, finding your true self again, and going into a healthy relationship with yourself first. Someone who experiences toxic relationships over and over and over again, guys, doesn't have a healthy relationship within. So us getting, repetitively being pulled into toxic relationships isn't because the world is so mean or we are so big victims and this makes, us special in some kind. No, it's because we have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves. So what these kind of relationships teach us is that the necessity to actually go into a healthier relationship with ourselves. Okay, and that then becomes our, healing process. So all we can, this is just like with drug abuse. Okay, there is no reconciliation with drug abuse. There is no closure with drug abuse other than staying away from it. You can't ever, use heroin again, because if you do, you'll die. And the same will happen to you, with toxicity in relationships. It would just consistently get worse. And then people end up with chronic illnesses, less life expectancy, lowered life expectancy, all kinds of mental, physical, and spiritual issues. Okay, so there are solutions, but the solutions all lie in what we are, we here as in transCODES, energy workers, energy heal, propagate you all day long, every day. And that is connecting with your true self, working on self-healing. These are everything that we do here at transCODES, not even the specific, trauma healing and trauma clearing, and not even the specific programs that we have. Of course, they help you specifically. They're specialized to get you, say in 90 days, to get you, to accompany you through your personal recovery process, because we understand, how taxing that is on all your systems. And, this cannot be done on your own. You need a coach or a therapist or, someone who can guide you through this, who has enough experience. But those are just like tailored programs. The recovery process is the process of taking our own power back, of coming out of this externalized view of power into an internalized view. So internalizing our inner power. When you get to that place where you can feel your own true self, when you can feel your own light, when you can feel your own power, you're just simply not susceptible to this anymore. And guess what? You're also not, a narcissistic supply anymore. You just don't carry that signature anymore. You will not be targeted anymore. It just disappears out of your life. Narcissists disappear out of your life. They still come, but they don't get anything from you because you're not externalized anymore. And so just to repeat this here, one of the things that narcissists and empaths, codependent empaths, I want to add to this, have in common is that they both need a they need another person, they need an externalized object to gain a sense of self, just with a different objective. Okay, the narcissist would try to get it from somebody else in the sense of taking it away from the other. The empath's codependent will try to please the other, and through the pleasing and through giving the other sort of what the anticipated need is that they have, we can get a better feeling for our own needs. Okay, so it's a two-step program for the empath codependent. We're feeding into the narcissist. We're actually voluntarily giving it. We're actually telegraphing that we are willing to give it, and the narcissist telegraphs that he's willing to take it. And this is what creates this this magnetism, this like really weird magnetism between empaths and narcissists, because we're both set up to externalize. Both experience a similar trauma in childhood, but at a slightly different age and with slightly different consequences. I have slides for that here that we're not going to get to. I want to work through these common abuse tactics with you real quick and what you can do against it. Silent treatment and the rejection. This, guys, constant criticism, projecting flaws, never validating your point of view. This is something that can be very, very annoying, but a lot of other people do this too in a day and age in society where being right and winning is more important than connecting and trying to work things out with another. You know, we're almost like used to it. We actually kind of conditioned to this in school and all that. But when this happens between loved ones, and you feel like the other person is constantly just pointing out what you're doing wrong and blah blah blah, and you constantly feel like they don't even want to listen to your point of view, they're not even interested in your point of view, this is actually a big red flag. You really have to step back and accept that, and then the solution is lowering your expectations. Okay. And eventually you're going to have to ask yourself, am I willing to live with this? Okay. But you have to stop expecting that the other will one day be interested in you, because they won't. And they won't give you that validation. It will never happen. They will send out breadcrumbs, you know, and say things like, oh, I'm interested in your opinion. What is your opinion about this and this and this and this? I constantly interrogate you about your opinion, only to get info about you and to turn around and use it against you. This is like, I'm not making this up, guys. Those are very very coverted and sneaky tactics. Silent treatment, rejection, I guess that's an obvious one. I think we all know, you know, especially codependent empaths, you know, like this feeling of being rejected, this feeling of being ignored, silent treatment, you know, the suddenly pulling out, you know, that feels like pulling the rug underneath our from under us, especially after a prolonged time of bombardment. So there's this love bombing, you know, as we call this, you know, where you're constantly being elevated and you're constantly being forced, hijacked into contact with them. They constantly text you, constantly, or call you, or email you, or depending on, you know, sort of what the kind of relationship it is that you have. And then all of a sudden, blank silence. Okay. And this leads to this self-doubt. Okay, and to a very strong, it's too of an extreme of an energy for your energy to, you know, needs time to regulate, and you don't even have the time to regulate, because as before you even know it, there is another push-pull mechanism that is now starting to hijack your energy again. It creates a lot of energetic stress in the person. So the only thing that you can do really with the silent treatment and the rejection is, especially if it's at the beginning of a relationship, to allow the space for silence, to go into no contact for no reason other than sort of just giving yourself some space to feel things out, to connect with yourself, and to become more clear about your sense of, so you know, your who you are and who the other is. This is you know, in general, something that is recommendable when you get confused and when you're starting to feel a little off balance, is to claim space for connecting with yourself. That is the only guarantee, the only countermeasure that you can do to prevent this silent treatment from hurting you and making you feel rejected and abandoned. Passive aggressiveness, intimidation, turning into a rage beast, or doing threats, either physically, emotionally, verbally, or even intellectually, is very common tactics. You know, in debates, and you know, even emotionally, you know, where you feel completely unsafe to actually express your true feelings, or they'll pretend that they're listening to your true feelings, and then they'll turn around and turn into this rage, you know, over what you just shared with them, and never validate your feelings in that sense. They will diminish it. They will say you overreact. I mean, they'll yell at you that they're not angry while they're being angry, okay? Which makes you feel like a total idiot, you know, about your own feelings. And then eventually you turn angry too, because it becomes so insane, you know, that things, you know, either in a passive aggressive or openly aggressive way turn out to be just, you know, really toxic. Gaslighting, denying, downplaying, implying others. This is one of the biggest things that we've been subjected to, especially as children. When we have been with a narcissist, there's this constant denying of things. No, I didn't say this. You made this up. No, oh, it wasn't that bad. Oh, you're just overreacting. No, it didn't happen this way. Um, no, they saw it too. It was the way they see it is like this. That's what implying others can go all the way to triangulating. Bringing in other people's opinions, using them against you. Mm. Crazy making, is then sort of this almost sort of strategic, making you feel like you're the crazy one, you know. And there's many tactics that can be used to make you feel crazy. One, obviously, is a pink elephant, to never actually acknowledge the truth about something. Constant lying, constant covering up, this constant feeling that you are sort of like the way this feels from the Orient is that you feel like that you are almost like catching them in things, and they constantly act like you are so I don't know the English word, but where you are like the one that actually tries to dig and to uncover their secrets. And this is also part of the tactic, is to make you feel like you are the one that is lying, or you're the one that is covering up. Jealousy is often used for that, actually projected jealousy, it's projected onto you, so they're jealous and they project this jealousy onto you, or this suspicion. Okay, I guess suspicion is that word. What you can do against this, all these gaslighting, crazy making can only be counteracted by you developing a real strong sense of self and a healthy relationship with yourself, because then you become able to discern truth. And if you look at energy updates or energy work that we do here at transCODES, it's every second sentence I say discerning truth, okay, because that's the skill that is needed to counteract any of this. Okay, then some of the verbal things that are very common to narcissism, and that is speaking over you, distracting, not even waiting for an answer. You know what I mean? Like they ask you something and they don't even wait for the answer, or they can even say things like I'm not interested in your answer, but they will make you feel like they're interested in, and then they don't even want to hear the answer. Also, a common thing is a word salad, mumbling, just sort of shooting things at you while they're walking by, or being in another room, constantly making you doubt that what you're hearing, is not right, or that puts you into this place where you have to ask again, what did you say, so you make sure that you understand this right. So that there's a constant distraction, a constant sort of a situation where that makes it really, really difficult for you to stay focused. Okay, this is, I don't know, I mean, the counteracting of that can only really be done through intellectual training. If you have intellectual, like dialectic training, you can uncover that, okay? You can uncover, the use of words. NLP can also help to uncover that. But you need a lot of training to actually prove this to somebody. How they do this strategically. Okay, so I wouldn't really try to get good at trying to prove that. On the contrary, I would continue to focus on the relationship with myself and my own ability to discern truth, to trust in my instincts, to go with my intuition, to really listen to the red flags that I'm feeling, because chances are that this is true for you. Yes. Hijacking your emotions. This is a very common tactic where they'll say really mean things, or they'll say things that are very upsetting to you. And then they say, oh, I was just kidding. Oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. So it's this constant, like, emotional roller coaster. You're constantly being pulled, you're constantly being hijacked with your emotions. As an empath, that's terrible. And you know what? This even can happen by them not even doing it to yourself. They're going through a constant emotional roller coaster, and that pulls you with them. Okay. This is then what triggers the codependency in many of us, where we get, even if we don't want to please or whatever, we just get so busy with just trying to figure out where the other person is at a given moment, that we forget to ask ourselves how we're feeling. So again, here, those are all tools. The counteraction is the same tools as self-healing and self-discovery, is to constantly go within yourself and ask yourself, how am I feeling? How am I feeling about this? What are my needs right now? Do I truly want this? How do I want this? Another tactic is the shaming, the name calling, statements about your identity. This is and personality is very, very common. Narcissists will make statements about you or other people, always in reference to their being, Oh, this is such a wonderful person. They're so great. They're like, or in the negative sense, oh, what a bad person, what a terrible person. This is because there is this issue with empathy and feeling and identity in a narcissist, that doesn't give them a consistent sense of self. And so as they are like literally projecting their own problem with their sense of self and with their identity, they're accusing others of doing that. They'll never really actually go into behavior. They'll always refer things to you as a being. With narcissistic parenting, it's detrimental because they'll constantly say things such as, you're a good boy, you're a good girl, you're great, this or that, and you're, really bad. Instead of pointing out that it is the behavior that they're referring to, they cannot differentiate between behavior and identity because they cannot differentiate that within themselves. Um, Shaming, name calling, guys, I mean, those are things that are not okay. They're never okay. Okay, so what can I say? How can you counteract that? By boundaries. So, by saying, hey, dude, you can do whatever you want to do and say whatever you want to say, obviously, but not to me or not in my space. So this is where boundary work comes in. Also here with verbal abuse and any kind of bullying. What gets really difficult here is the implanted belief about self. That's something we can see in an energetic sense, where this transference takes place. And this is something that is detrimental when you were raised by narcissistic parents, because that becomes part of your core beliefs about yourself. This requires, in-depth energy work, because you cannot access that with your brain, with your mind. This has to be bypassed. You have to literally form new energetic and neurological hardwires to get past that. It's very, very difficult to deal with. Emotional energetic manipulation and using your emotional state against you. Here is something that I shared earlier. This is something very important to understand. Both narcissists and empaths are energetically sensitive, but they're using their skills in a different way. An empath will try to use it to, of course, to read others and to help others, and not all just for positive or they often mean well, but it's not always healthy for the other person. But there's a sort of a general understanding of mutuality. Whereas the narcissist will use their energetic sensitivity to get one up on you, to read you better, to control you better, to manipulate you better. The thing, though, with empaths, and especially codependent empaths, is that we also develop this shadow trait that we then use our own energetic sensitivity to become better energy readers and coverted manipulators. So we do a manipulation here as well, and that is very hard to accept. Not very popular stance. Always gets me shit when I say this, because of course it's a lot easier, to see the world in this binary way and to make all empaths the victims. So that is not the case. The codependent empath does have his and her own part, namely the co-narcissistic part, and that is that we actually literally believe that due to our being an empath and energetic reading abilities, we could change that. We could change or even heal or fix the narcissist. So that is what glues us together. That is what attracts us to narcissists. And this requires, the counteraction requires us to own up to our own shit, own up to our own payoff in that, and our own shadow traits, guys. So this obviously comes with shadow work, in inner child work. This is what we've done here in the last couple of weeks at I mean, we always do this. You can book these sessions at all times, private sessions, but we've done this, sort of in this public group type of session. So emotional and energetic manipulation, the narcissist and the empath almost do just as, they do the same amount. They just do it with different intentions, and that's why in the end, you have one end up being traumatized and the other not. Okay, so at the end of the day, yes, there is a victimization that takes place, but there also is a counter mechanism in the victim, which is the victimizer, that actually then turns the victim into the perpetrator. And this is what you can see, in pathology a lot, where people who actually have been traumatized a lot by narcissists then turn into perpetrators. This is why it's so detrimental when you've been raised by narcissistic parents, because you're always sitting on the verge of either being codependent or becoming a narcissist yourself. Okay, and covert or overt versions. So from an energetic point of view, guys, I hate to say it this way, but we have to come to a conclusion here. Narcissists and empaths are both energetically sensitive, but with different objectives. Both project, and both get a payoff, but it leads the empath sucked dry, and it leads the narcissist empowered. Yes, so we have to come to a stop here because we're going over time. We'll probably do a part 2, and then I'll take your suggestion and do a workshop here within the Sacred Self-Healing community just on narcissistic parenting. Guys, if you are not part of the Sacred Self-Healing course, please consider this. It allows you to work on your own connection with self and own self-healing and your own pace on your own. We have constant webinars and workshops going on that help you with the deeper understanding and also the usage and the terminology. It's $39 a month, and you get all these workshops for free. And if you want to go a step further, even check out the 90-day tailored self-mastery programs where we guide you through a 3-month program with energy sessions and energy coaching and so forth, intense, just for you personally, to guide you through your healing process. That also comes with the Sacred Self-Healing course as an add-on, so you get that automatically. Please check those things out. This work is ongoing here. We've been doing this for 10 years, so there's a lot, that comes forward, of course, when we start doing these workshops. Yes, and thank you for sharing. Yes, thank you so much. This was unbelievably helpful, especially helping me to allow and connect with what was shared in the beginning. Yes, obviously that was not, that's not on my control, but this is the beauty here of sharing. Yes, thank you for your wonderful comments here. Thank you for all your contributions and your love, and for your time, for spending your time. There'll be a recording of this workshop accessible for everybody in the Sacred Self-Healing course, in the Sacred Self-Healing forum, and you'll get an email with the recording. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.